Velasco, and thank you for reading.
Manny Pacquiao, Nicole, I don't think there'll be a problem for Manny.
Has its share of great fights. But every once in a while, the mind can also be controlled from nothing. Again, happening to nothing.
PM, only here on Para sa Bayan.
That's the opening bell for Round by Round presented by Eastern Communications. Mabuhay Pilipinas! Welcome world! I'm Nisi Casiano.
And I'm Bill Velasco.
Recently, the WBC confirmed that Errol Spence Jr. is cleared to get back into action after going through a surgery on his torn retina, which was the main cause why he had to pull out from his fight against Manny Pacquiao last August. Bill, mahigit 3 buwan na ang nakalipas, pero ikaw ba sa tingin mo, with how things played out, do you still see it as a missed opportunity for Errol Spence, or do you think na kahit natuloy pa yung laban nila, he has nothing to gain from it kasi with how Manny performed against your Dennis Ugas?
No, I think it was clearly a missed historic opportunity for Errol Spence Jr. First of all, a lot of people assume that he's a better boxer than your Dennis Ugas. And secondly, I mean, who would not want to be known as the last man to fight Manny Pacquiao and probably beat him, you know? But now, I think the issue is, ang daming sinasabi, ang daming nang lumalabas na satsat, no? Tungkol kay Errol Spence Jr., no? Sean Porter says that Terence Crawford is better than Errol Spence Jr. because he's fought both of them and lost to both of them. Now, Porter lost the IBF and WBC belts to Spence by split decision in 2019, and he had never been stopped. So, you know, until this last fight against Crawford, Spence was actually at ringside watching the Crawford-Porter fight, but he left early, was shaking his head, was showing signs of disappointment. But then again, you know, this is probably all hype. Remember, this is not the first time that Spence has been unable to fight because of some injury. He crashed his Ferrari Spider in 2019, got thrown out of the car. Luckily, the car tumbled all over middle lane barrier, and you know, it kept him from boxing for a while. My biggest question here is yung kumpiyansa niya, kasi you know, anytime you have an injury to the eye, you know, it's not like a broken bone that can heal and heals even stronger. With the eye, you never know. You know, and of course, a lot of boxers are headhunters. Kaya ang problema dyan, paano pag tinamaan yung mata niya? Will he get scared? The potential to go blind, because you know, back in the day, you have any injury to your retina, that's it. You know, it's end of the road for you. Even great boxers like Sugar Ray Leonard took much longer to come back to the ring. Of course, we talked about Leonard in my segment on the greatest comebacks. Pero yun ang nakakatakot kasi una-una, nasa mukha mo yung mata mo. Pangalawa, that will get hit repeatedly during a fight. So it might be playing in his mind. You know, na siyempre ang boksingero iniiwasang isipin yung may mapinsala sa katawan nila, but still, you know, the potential to go blind, even in the back of your mind, is going to keep you from achieving whatever greatness you're going after.
Bill, totoo yan. And right now, nakikita ko nga sa research that iba na rin yung tinatawag na recovery period when it comes to torn retina, kasi ang binibigay na lang nila ngayon is 1 to 4 weeks ang pagdating sa recovery. Now, you made a good point when it comes to, you know, the pressure on the part of Terence Crawford. And, you know, boxing is a cruel sport. And if you would recall, Manny Pacquiao was pretty much on his way after the fight against Jeff Horn, and he bounced back. And I believe that this was when Al Haymon saw the opportunity. If Bob Arum failed to make a fight between Pacquiao and Terence Crawford, Al Haymon devised a plan that would orchestrate the career resurgence of Manny Pacquiao by beating Adrian Broner and then Keith Thurman. But the end goal of it was really a passing of the torch kind of fight against Errol Spence Jr. My point is, whether you say that Manny Pacquiao is old or no longer in his prime, facing a Manny Pacquiao still holds a lot of weight. Missing out on that Manny Pacquiao fight is similar to falling flat on your face. Bill, it now forces Errol Spence to face one of the biggest name in the division in the form of Terence Crawford. Yun yung sinasabi ko, may pressure ngayon eh. Kasi yung biggest name, hindi niya nakuha in Manny Pacquiao last August. Ngayon talagang pinipuwersa siya na talagang, huy, kailangan ko ng kalabanan itong si Terence Crawford.
Oh, at saka ang mabigat din ni hindi niya kasalanan yung nangyari sa kanya.
Exactly.
So there's also that feeling of helplessness. And now, I think all of this is just really, Porter and Crawford are just trying to erode his confidence because, again, you don't know what will happen when you take that eye into the ring. Gaano ba kagaling yung doktor natin. Although, in other cases, if you tear your ACL or you break some bones, they're usually stronger when they come back. With the eye, that's still an unknown factor. So the layoff, the surgery, the uncertainty, these will all play into his mind. So it's more mental than anything else. If he can still achieve the sharpness and the daring that he had when before this injury, because he came back very strong after the car accident.
Yeah.
That was just 2 years ago. So I hope that for his sake, it doesn't play into his mind. You mentioned Matisse and Broner. They both had, had issues psychologically. That's why, after the Pacquiao fight, it's like they were totally lost. And Broner again had his run-in with the law after that. So that's my only concern, that psychologically, could that be a turning point in his career for the worse?
Now, Bill, we talked about this last week when we heard the news that the WBC gave Canelo Alvarez the clearance to challenge Ilunga Makabu for the cruiserweight title. The impression is that the WBC is not really making an effort to put up or order fights that fans would love to see. But for the welterweight division, the scenario is different kasi the winner of the fight between Tulani Membenj and Edward Skavinsky for the vacant silver title will go on to face Alexander Besputin to determine the mandatory challenger. Pwede naman kasing gawin nila, ibigay na lang WBC kay Virgil Ortiz, who's currently ranked number 1. But by the looks of it, to me, the WBC is giving the camp of Errol Spence to try to make the fight against Terence Crawford, who recently cut ties with Bob Arum and Top Rank. Do you feel the same?
I think everybody wants to make big money fights, no? And they're lucky because ang dami mong pagpipilian ngayon sa welterweight division, no? It's harking back to the late 80s, early 90s when you had Duran, Hagler, Leonard, Hearns, couple of other
Horsemen,
big names. O, di ba? So, pag para ka na lang carousel, just pick who can fight who among those guys. No need to mix in the lesser names for me. But the fact that they're trying to get Spence back into the mix, because that was really just fairly recent that he got injured. That was just one fight. So not much harm really to his career. He didn't lose anything. So I think to bring him back into the mix is a very good move on their part. Dahil bata pa si Spence, magtatagal pa yan. Kaya maganda yan because it's also a rivalry. You have two undefeated fighters.
Yes.
So, and both, champions. And people always want to see that. And I think that's the best part about it. Where were you when so-and-so suffered his first loss in a world title fight? So I think that's the fight to beat in 2022.
Bill, another option for Terence Crawford is to have a unification fight against WBA champion Yordenis Ugas, who's really disappointed with the WBA for ordering a box of a mini 4-man tournament. Do you want to see this fight first? O kasi kung manalo man si Terence Crawford, he will have both WBA and WBO belts. And kung maglaban sila ni Errol Spence, later next year, then it's for all the marbles when he fights Errol Spence Jr. Your take, Bill?
And I don't really know how relevant your Dennis Ugas is dahil, una-una, pamalit lang talaga siya dun sa laban ni Manny Pacquiao. Nagkataon na Manny Pacquiao ang kalaban niya, nagkataon na world title fight. Then he had some very good PR after the victory. He was magnanimous, showed a lot of respect. Tapos, biglang ngayon, binanatan niya yung organisasyon dahil pinipilit siyang magkaroon ng mini tournament. Although technically he's a very sound boxer, but he could possibly get knocked out if he fought either of those big names in the welterweight class. Kaya tingin ko, you're right. No, that fight for being undisputed welterweight champion is going to be a very big deal. So I think that may be what they're leading to in 2022.
Bill, speaking of Terence Crawford, PBC seems to be the best landing spot for him because of the roster of welterweights that they have. Di na siguro katakataka kung gagamiting bargaining chip ito ng PBC ang itong laban kontra kay Errol Spence Jr.
Tingnan mo naman si saan pa ba pupunta si Errol Spence?
Yeah.
Diba? Where else is he gonna head? I mean, that fight, is something fans have been wanting, like the Pacquiao-Mayweather fight, which took so long. And if it happens great. Somebody's got to lose eventually, and then it sparks a rivalry.
Yeah.
It creates the revenge factor. Yan naman ang kwento ng boxing na gustong-gusto ng mga manonood.
Well, I guess it's really up to Al Heyman and PBC to sweeten up the deal for Crawford and find a way to make the best fight at 147 pounds in 2022. Former interim WBA featherweight champion Jack Tepora returns to action on December 17 in Bohol against Gino Rodrigo. He was originally set to face Ryan Maano, but due to unforeseen circumstances, Maano had to pull out of the fight. Tepora's bout against Rodrigo is scheduled for 8 rounds in the light welterweight division. Bill, alam naman natin na gumawa ng ingay itong si Jack Tepora a few months ago for calling out Mark Magsayo. Clearly, nandun yung giggle to fight again, but this is the right way to do. This is the right way to do it for a boxer like Tepora who hasn't fought for over 2 years.
Alam mo, ang mahirap dito, it's everything has been sort of been magnified in the negative, for Jack Tepora. Una-una ang ganda ng record niya. 23-1, 17 KOs. Pero yung huling laban niya, after it sort of he fell a great distance after becoming interim world champion. He lost to Oscar Escandon, and that's Escandon's only win in his last 5 fights.
Yeah.
Escandon had lost his last 3 fights before knocking out Tepora. So that coupled with all this time to think about what has been happening to his career, inabot siya ng pandemic. But sa totoo lang, kung may interest talaga sa kanya at may gumagawa ng paraan na lumaban siya, it shouldn't have taken him this long to get back into action. I mean, boxing is the first sport to return to normal. Kaya nagtataka lang ako bakit inabot siya ng 2 taon na hindi man lang lumaban. And then it's just a busy fight, no? It's just a tune-up basically. Kaya parang napakatagal ng panahon na lumipas para sa kanya na lumaban ulit.
Totoo yan kasi kung titignan mo itong Oscar Escandon fight, he lost that via KO. Parang double whammy ang nangyari kasi he lost his interim title. He was supposed to fight on the undercard of the fight between Manny Pacquiao and Adrian Broner, if I'm not mistaken. But he lost his title on the weighing scale. Hindi naman sa mismong laban. Now going back to the fight this coming December. Alam mo yun, kahit sabihin natin na malaki yung tinatawag na difference in terms of experience, sa akin kasi it still serves a huge purpose kasi dito natin malalaman kung nandun pa rin yung tinatawag na killer's instinct or sinasabing mindset ng isang boksingero kay Jack Tepora.
At saka parang patong-patong yung problema, no? Natalo siya, knockout pa, ngayon naghihirap siya sa timbang. Then he had a replacement fighter pa yung makakalaban niya na baka machambahan pa siya. I mean, we saw, when Mark Magsaysay first went to the US, he fought a replacement fighter and who happened to be very talented and luckily won. So parang ayokong sabihin, pero parang may lumalabas na parang inaalat itong si Jack Tepora, and he really will have to do a lot to overcome that. First of all, he's only fighting in Bohol. So I doubt if that's going to be covered on mainstream television. I doubt if anybody's going to see highlights of that on YouTube. And where's the interest going to come from if he's not doing anything impactful or highly visible? Kasi kailangan talaga makita ka ng tao, and he really has to perform spectacularly well. Kung hindi, wala na siya.
Now, pag-usapan nga natin si Rodrigo. Compared to Maanyo, mas maganda itong record nga ni Rodrigo kasi he holds a record of 6 wins with 4 knockouts, with 2 defeats and 2 draws. And he may not be as experienced as Tepora, but he has a far better record on paper than Maano, whose Maano has 5 wins and 11 defeats. But though he is facing Tepora, who's obviously a more experienced fighter, do you still see it as a good avenue for Rodrigo's development as a boxer, win, lose, or draw?
Ako kasi hindi ko masyadong pinapansin yung mga talo ng mga baguhang boksingero. First of all, sometimes they get into the fight game managing themselves, or they go from one manager to another, or they're just part of a flock of boxers that some would-be manager is financing or taking care of. Kaya I take it with a grain of salt when you say yes, this early in his career he's already tasted a couple of defeats. I think this will be a good fight for him. If he has 4 knockouts, then that means he has some punching power, and he may be more of a natural at light welterweight than Tepora. So again, si Tepora na yun yung may panganib. He's taking more of a risk. Plus, as a replacement fighter, he's an unknown quantity. There's how do you scout somebody with how do you change your game plan with only a couple of weeks to go? So for me, it may be more of an opportunity for him. And if he ends up knocking out Tepora would become just a footnote, and he becomes the main story. Again, what is critical there is there going to be any media exposure for this fight card, so that either of these fighters will get some measure of respect and a lot of attention from the boxing community. Yun ang sa tingin ko mas importante, because there are fighters who become more well known after a tough loss than an easy win.
Bill, to end this discussion, you mentioned about yung predicament, the entire predicament or the entire situation of Jack Tepora. Do you still see a glimmer of hope that Jack Tepora will be able to regain his stature in the sport, which was very promising to say the least?
Alam mo, nung nabanggit na sa Bohol gaganapin tong laban, biglang pumasok sa isip ko si Bumbum Bautista. For how many years there would be fight cards. For example, 2011, yung unang boxing event na ginawa sa Mall of Asia Arena. Lahat ng boksingero doon nanalo. Si Bumbum Bautista lang yung medyo hindi maganda yung pinakita. Tapos it turns out that for 2 years he'd been fighting with a floating bone in his wrist. And then nung lumaban siya sa Bohol, he was able to get his home crowd there, so many people, it was open air. Tapos yung dumating na kalaban, hindi pala yun yung dapat niyang kalaban, kapangalan lang pala. Not an 8-time contender for a world title. So a lot of disappointments happening along the way, and for some reason he was never able to really overcome them. So I hope that does not happen to Jack Tepora, dahil magaling naman yung bata kung sa magaling. So for me, the concern now is how do you shake all that off? How do you make a shift? How do you get back on track for greatness? He's already been an interim champion. He was one step away from really becoming a legit world title holder. Kaya delikado rin tong laban na to, so he has to take this seriously.
It's time for our Fearless Fighter of the Day, brought to you by Eastern Communications. And he's none other than Mark Viselles, a southpaw from Lebac, Sultan Kudarat. He holds an immaculate professional record of 14-0 with 1 draw and 8 wins by way of knockout. Viselles is ranked number 7 in the WBO, number 12 in the IBF, and number 5 in the WBC. The 25-year-old boxer is set to return to action on December 10 in Bohol against Toto Landero. Mark Viselles is our fearless fighter. Now is the time for reliable connections. Eastern Communications Fiber One is ideal for powering small, medium enterprises that are on their way to digitizing their business and pushing forward to a strong and fearless tomorrow. Do contact 53007,000 or visit their website eastern.com.ph for more information about the service. And that's our Eastern Communications Fearless Fighter of the Day. And that's the final bell for today's episode of Round by Round, presented by Eastern Communications. I'm Isi Casiano.
And I'm Bill Velasco. We're on Facebook at 6 p.m. Monday to Friday and on our YouTube channel immediately after. So like, follow, share, and subscribe now. And also don't forget to hit the notification bell to get all the latest news and, of course, all our interesting views about the world of boxing.
Attorney Ed Tolentino, Santino Hunasan, and yours truly will be working the fights for you on Monday. So catch us on the next Round by Round. All boxing, all Filipino, all the time. See you on Monday, and happy weekend.